Question 1. Benchmark analysis indicates that prospective students applying for admission to Air University Islamabad may encounter pressure to achieve high scores. Considering the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines governing university entrance examinations in Pakistan, which of the following actions best exemplifies a student's commitment to academic integrity and adherence to these standards? Option A. Attempting to obtain and utilize leaked question papers from previous or current examination cycles. Option B. Accessing external websites or communication channels using unauthorized electronic devices during the examination period. Option C. Thoroughly studying the prescribed syllabus, utilizing official study materials provided by Air University, and seeking clarification on complex topics from faculty or designated academic support services. Option D. Engaging a proxy individual to impersonate the applicant and complete the examination. The correct answer is C. Thoroughly studying the prescribed syllabus, utilizing official study materials provided by Air University, and seeking clarification on complex topics from faculty or designated academic support services. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to excel and the ethical imperative to uphold academic integrity. Pressure to perform well in a competitive entrance exam, like the Air University Islamabad entrance exam, can lead individuals to consider shortcuts. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation, ensuring that all actions align with the established regulatory framework and ethical guidelines of the institution. The correct approach involves a student diligently preparing for the exam through legitimate means, such as studying course materials, attending review sessions, and practicing with sample questions provided by Air University. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with the regulatory framework of academic institutions, which emphasizes merit-based evaluation and prohibits any form of academic dishonesty. Air University's examination guidelines, like those of most reputable educational bodies, strictly forbid cheating, plagiarism, and the use of unauthorized materials. Adhering to these guidelines ensures a fair and equitable assessment for all candidates. An incorrect approach would be to seek or use leaked exam papers. This action directly violates the principles of academic integrity and the specific regulations of Air University regarding examination conduct. Such behavior constitutes cheating, which can lead to severe penalties, including disqualification from the exam and potential blacklisting from future admissions. Furthermore, it undermines the credibility of the examination process and devalues the achievements of honest candidates. Another incorrect approach would be to engage a third party to take the exam on behalf of the student. This is a form of impersonation and academic fraud, which is a serious offense under academic regulations. It not only violates the trust placed in the candidate by the institution, but also constitutes a criminal act in many jurisdictions. The regulatory framework of Air University, like any academic institution, is designed to ensure that assessments reflect the individual knowledge and capabilities of the student. A third incorrect approach would be to use unauthorized electronic devices during the exam to access external information. This is a clear violation of examination rules designed to maintain a controlled and fair testing environment. Such devices can be used for communication or accessing prohibited data, thereby providing an unfair advantage. The regulatory framework for examinations typically includes strict prohibitions on the use of any electronic devices not explicitly permitted by the invigilator. The professional decision-making process for students facing such dilemmas should involve a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policy and examination rules. When faced with the temptation to engage in unethical practices, students should prioritize honest preparation and seek clarification from university authorities if they are unsure about acceptable study methods or exam procedures. The long-term consequences of academic dishonesty, including reputational damage and potential legal repercussions, far outweigh any perceived short-term benefits. Question 2. To address the challenge of ensuring a fair and transparent admission process at Air University Islamabad, an applicant receives an unsolicited offer of assistance from an acquaintance who claims to have connections that can smooth the way for their application, particularly regarding a specific, potentially complex, departmental requirement. The applicant is unsure if this offer aligns with the university's official admission guidelines. Which of the following actions best upholds the principles of academic integrity and regulatory compliance within the context of Air University Islamabad's entrance exam framework? Option A. Ignore the acquaintance's offer and proceed with the application independently, hoping that the lack of external influence will be sufficient to ensure fairness, without seeking any clarification on the potentially complex requirement. Option B. Proactively contact the Air University Islamabad admission office to seek clarification on the specific departmental requirement and inquire about any approved channels for assistance or guidance, while politely declining the acquaintance's offer until its legitimacy and compliance with university policy can be confirmed. Option C. Accept the acquaintance's offer of assistance, assuming their connections will provide a legitimate advantage and expedite the application process without raising suspicion. Option D. Discreetly leverage the acquaintance's connections to gain preferential treatment for the departmental requirement, believing that such unofficial channels are common practice in competitive admissions. The correct answer is B. Proactively contact the Air University Islamabad admission office to seek clarification on the specific departmental requirement and inquire about any approved channels for assistance or guidance, while politely declining the acquaintance's offer until its legitimacy and compliance with university policy can be confirmed. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate a situation where personal interests might conflict with the ethical and regulatory obligations expected of a student or applicant within the Air University Islamabad's admission process. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining integrity and adhering to the established rules, even when faced with an opportunity that could be perceived as advantageous, but is obtained through improper means. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate academic pursuits and actions that could compromise the fairness and credibility of the admission process. The correct approach involves proactively seeking clarification and adhering strictly to the official admission guidelines provided by Air University Islamabad. This demonstrates a commitment to transparency, honesty, and respect for the established procedures. By directly engaging with the university's admission office and following their directives, the individual upholds the principles of academic integrity and ensures that their application is evaluated on its merits, free from any undue influence or misrepresentation. This aligns with the implicit ethical framework governing university admissions, which prioritizes fairness and equal opportunity for all applicants. An incorrect approach would be to accept the offer of assistance from the acquaintance without verifying its legitimacy or adherence to university policy. This action, even if well-intentioned, bypasses the official channels and could be construed as an attempt to gain an unfair advantage. It violates the principle of academic honesty and could lead to severe consequences, including the rejection of the application or disciplinary action, should it be discovered. Furthermore, it undermines the trust placed in applicants to follow the prescribed admission process. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the acquaintance's offer and proceed with the application without seeking any clarification, especially if there is genuine uncertainty about specific requirements. While this avoids direct impropriety, it misses an opportunity to ensure full compliance and could lead to unintentional errors or omissions in the application, potentially jeopardizing its success. This approach lacks the proactive engagement necessary for a robust and compliant application process. A further incorrect approach would be to attempt to use the acquaintance's connections without explicit university approval or knowledge. This is ethically dubious and potentially fraudulent, as it implies an attempt to manipulate the admission process through unofficial means. It directly contravenes the spirit of fair competition and could lead to severe repercussions for both the applicant and potentially the acquaintance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the governing rules and regulations. When faced with ambiguity or an offer that seems outside the norm, the first step is always to consult the official documentation and contact the relevant authority, in this case, the Air University Islamabad Admission Office, for clarification. Transparency and adherence to established procedures are paramount. If an offer of assistance is made, it should be evaluated against these official guidelines. If it appears to circumvent or violate these guidelines, it should be politely declined, and the official process should be followed rigorously. Question 3. The review process indicates that an applicant to the Air University Islamabad's engineering program has a GPA that is marginally below the stated minimum requirement, but their statement of purpose demonstrates exceptional insight into the field, and their letters of recommendation highlight significant practical experience and problem-solving skills gained through internships. Which of the following approaches best reflects a professionally sound and ethically responsible admissions decision-making process for this scenario? Option A. Focus primarily on the applicant's extracurricular achievements and leadership roles, assuming these will compensate for any academic deficiencies. Option B. Immediately reject the applicant based on their GPA falling below the stated minimum requirement, as adherence to numerical thresholds is paramount for maintaining academic standards. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire application, including their statement of purpose, letters of recommendation, and any provided evidence of practical experience, to assess their overall potential for success in the engineering program, considering the GPA as one factor among many. Option D. Offer the applicant provisional admission contingent upon them achieving a significantly higher GPA in a preparatory course, without thoroughly evaluating their existing strengths. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire application, including their statement of purpose, letters of recommendation, and any provided evidence of practical experience, to assess their overall potential for success in the engineering program, considering the GPA as one factor among many. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in academic institutions where an applicant's prior academic record, while meeting minimum requirements, raises concerns about their potential for success in a rigorous program. The challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to admitting qualified students with the need to ensure admitted students have a strong likelihood of graduating and contributing positively to the academic community. The admissions committee must exercise careful judgment to avoid both admitting underprepared students and unfairly excluding potentially capable individuals. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a holistic review that goes beyond mere numerical thresholds. This entails a thorough examination of the applicant's entire application, including their statement of purpose, letters of recommendation, extracurricular activities, and any mitigating circumstances presented. The admissions committee should seek to understand the context of the applicant's academic performance, looking for evidence of growth, resilience, and a genuine passion for the field of study. This approach aligns with the principles of fair and equitable admissions, allowing for a nuanced assessment of potential rather than a rigid adherence to minimum scores. It also reflects the ethical responsibility of the university to admit students who are likely to succeed and benefit from the educational experience. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that solely relies on the minimum GPA, disregarding other aspects of the application, is procedurally flawed. This fails to acknowledge the multifaceted nature of academic potential and can lead to the exclusion of promising candidates who may have faced temporary setbacks or demonstrated their capabilities through non-traditional means. It also risks admitting students who meet the numerical benchmark but lack the motivation or foundational understanding necessary for advanced study. An approach that immediately rejects the applicant based on a slightly below-average GPA without further investigation into their application materials is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to consider all relevant information. It can lead to arbitrary decisions and may not align with the university's stated commitment to diversity and inclusivity, which often requires looking beyond simple metrics. An approach that focuses exclusively on the applicant's perceived fit with the university culture without a substantive review of their academic qualifications is ethically problematic. While cultural fit is a consideration, it should not supersede the fundamental requirement of academic preparedness for the chosen program. This can lead to biased admissions decisions and undermine the academic rigor of the university. Professional reasoning. Professionals in admissions should adopt a systematic and comprehensive decision-making process. This involves clearly defining admission criteria, ensuring these criteria are applied consistently and fairly, and establishing a process for reviewing applications that allows for a holistic assessment. When borderline cases arise, a structured discussion among committee members, supported by evidence from the application, is crucial. The process should prioritize fairness, transparency, and the ultimate goal of admitting students who are well-suited to the program and likely to thrive. Question 4. What factors determine the ethical and regulatory acceptability of an applicant's preparation methods for the Air University Islamabad entrance exam? Option A. The applicant's financial capacity to access specialized coaching centers or private tutors. Option B. The perceived difficulty of the examination and the applicant's personal desire to gain admission, regardless of the methods employed. Option C. The extent to which preparation methods align with principles of academic integrity, fairness to other candidates, and adherence to the explicit and implicit rules governing the examination process. Option D. The availability of study materials, irrespective of their origin or how they were obtained. The correct answer is C. The extent to which preparation methods align with principles of academic integrity, fairness to other candidates, and adherence to the explicit and implicit rules governing the examination process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only academic aptitude, but also an understanding of the ethical and regulatory considerations inherent in academic integrity, particularly within the context of a competitive entrance examination. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to succeed with the imperative to uphold honesty and fairness, which are foundational principles of any reputable educational institution like Air University Islamabad. Careful judgment is required to navigate the subtle distinctions between acceptable preparation and unethical shortcuts. The correct approach involves a thorough and honest self-assessment of one's preparedness, focusing on legitimate study methods and understanding the syllabus comprehensively. This approach aligns with the core values of academic integrity, which are implicitly and explicitly promoted by Air University's examination framework. By relying on personal effort and genuine learning, an applicant demonstrates respect for the examination process and for fellow candidates, fostering a culture of meritocracy. This is ethically sound as it upholds fairness and honesty, and it is regulatorily compliant with the spirit and likely explicit rules of any university entrance exam that prohibits cheating or unfair advantage. An incorrect approach that involves seeking or utilizing leaked examination materials is a direct violation of academic integrity and examination regulations. This constitutes cheating, which undermines the fairness of the selection process and devalues the achievements of honest candidates. Ethically, it is dishonest and unfair. Regulatorily, it would likely contravene specific rules of the Air University entrance exam regarding examination conduct and academic misconduct, potentially leading to disqualification and a permanent mark on the applicant's record. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to bribe an invigilator or administrator, represents a severe ethical and regulatory breach. This is not only dishonest but also illegal, involving corruption and subversion of a legitimate process. Ethically, it is reprehensible and demonstrates a lack of moral character. Regulatorily, it would be a grave offense against the rules and potentially the laws governing examinations in public institutions, resulting in severe penalties. A third incorrect approach, such as misrepresenting qualifications or providing false information on the application form, is also a violation of academic honesty and regulatory compliance. While not directly related to the examination itself, it is a form of deception that compromises the integrity of the application process. Ethically, it is dishonest and unfair to other applicants who provide truthful information. Regulatorily, it would likely be a breach of the university's admissions policy and could lead to the revocation of any offer of admission. The professional reasoning process for an applicant in such a situation should involve a clear understanding of the examination's purpose, to assess genuine merit and potential. This requires prioritizing honest preparation, seeking clarification on syllabus content through official channels, and adhering strictly to all examination rules and guidelines. When faced with the temptation of unethical shortcuts, an applicant should recall the long-term consequences of such action, including reputational damage and the erosion of personal integrity. The decision-making framework should be guided by a commitment to fairness, honesty, and respect for the established academic and regulatory framework of Air University Islamabad. Question 5. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential instance of academic dishonesty during the Air University Islamabad entrance examination. As an invigilator, you observe a candidate discreetly using a small, pre-written note during the exam. The university's examination guidelines clearly outline procedures for handling suspected cheating, emphasizing reporting to the chief invigilator and maintaining exam integrity. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for invigilators at Air University Islamabad? Option A. Approach the candidate privately after the exam to discuss the note and ask them to voluntarily withdraw from the examination. Option B. Ignore the observation to avoid disrupting the examination and potentially causing a scene, assuming it might be a minor oversight. Option C. Discreetly inform the candidate that their actions are being observed and suggest they refrain from further use of the note, without formal reporting. Option D. Discreetly confiscate the note and the candidate's answer sheet, then immediately report the incident to the chief invigilator with a detailed written account. Correct answer is D. Discreetly confiscate the note and the candidate's answer sheet, then immediately report the incident to the chief invigilator with a detailed written account. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to meet institutional performance metrics. The university entrance exam, as a gatekeeper for academic progression, demands a rigorous and fair assessment process. Any deviation from established protocols, even with perceived good intentions, can undermine the validity of the examination and the credibility of the institution. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for accurate student evaluation with the ethical obligation to uphold the integrity of the examination process as defined by Air University Islamabad's regulatory framework. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the established examination guidelines and reporting any suspected irregularities through the designated channels. This upholds the principle of fairness and ensures that all candidates are assessed on their own merit, as mandated by the university's examination regulations. This approach prioritizes the integrity of the assessment process, which is a fundamental ethical and regulatory requirement for any educational institution. It ensures that the entrance exam serves its intended purpose of identifying qualified candidates based on objective criteria, thereby maintaining the academic standards of Air University Islamabad. An incorrect approach would be to overlook the suspected cheating. This failure to act directly violates the university's examination regulations, which mandate reporting of all irregularities. Ethically, it is a breach of professional duty to allow unfair advantages, as it compromises the fairness of the assessment for all other candidates. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the student directly and attempt to resolve the issue informally. Seemingly proactive, this bypasses the established disciplinary procedures outlined by the university. This can lead to inconsistent application of rules, potential for bias, and a lack of proper documentation, all of which are regulatory failures. It also places the invigilator in a position of judgment and enforcement that is not their designated role, potentially leading to further complications. A third incorrect approach would be to alter the student's score to reflect a perceived fairer outcome without following due process. This is a severe regulatory and ethical violation. It constitutes academic misconduct, undermines the objectivity of the examination, and can lead to legal repercussions for the invigilator and the institution. The university's framework for handling examination irregularities is designed to ensure impartiality and due process for all involved. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's examination rules and regulations. When an irregularity is suspected, the immediate step is to document the observation accurately and discreetly. Following this, the invigilator must report the incident to the designated examination authority or supervisor, as per the established protocol. This ensures that the university's internal procedures are followed, and the matter is handled by those empowered to investigate and make decisions, thereby preserving the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination. Question 6. Stakeholder feedback indicates that some students at Air University Islamabad are seeking direct assistance from faculty members to complete assignments in ways that may circumvent the spirit of original work and potentially lead to plagiarism. A student approaches you, a faculty member, requesting specific phrases and sentence structures to incorporate into their research paper to make it sound more sophisticated, implying they are struggling to articulate their ideas effectively and are looking for shortcuts. Which of the following is the most appropriate course of action for the faculty member to take? Option A. Ignore the student's request and hope they find a way to complete their assignment ethically on their own. Option B. Provide the student with a list of sophisticated phrases and sentence structures that can be used in academic writing, advising them to use these judiciously. Option C. Politely decline the request for specific phrases and sentence structures. Explain the university's policy on academic integrity and plagiarism, and offer to guide the student on how to properly paraphrase, cite sources, and develop their own arguments. Option D. Suggest that the student consult with a professional academic writing service that specializes in improving the language and structure of research papers. The correct answer is C. Politely decline the request for specific phrases and sentence structures. Explain the university's policy on academic integrity and plagiarism, and offer to guide the student on how to properly paraphrase, cite sources, and develop their own arguments. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's perceived academic needs and the university's established academic integrity policies. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing support for student learning with the imperative to uphold ethical standards and prevent academic misconduct. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent communication with the student regarding the university's policies on academic integrity and the consequences of plagiarism. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with the regulatory framework of Air University Islamabad, which mandates adherence to its academic rules and regulations. By clearly explaining the boundaries and expectations, the faculty member upholds their responsibility to foster an honest academic environment. This proactive communication serves as a preventative measure and educates the student on acceptable academic practices, thereby promoting a culture of integrity. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the student's request or to provide the requested assistance without addressing the underlying issue of potential plagiarism. Ignoring the request fails to fulfill the faculty member's duty of care and guidance towards the student, potentially leading the student to engage in academic misconduct unknowingly or intentionally. Providing assistance without addressing the plagiarism concern directly condones unethical behavior and violates the university's academic integrity policy. This could lead to a compromised academic record for the student and damage the reputation of the institution. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately report the student for plagiarism without any prior discussion or clarification. A reporting is a necessary step if misconduct is confirmed. Bypassing an opportunity for dialogue and education can be overly punitive and may not account for potential misunderstandings or unintentional errors by the student. This approach, while seemingly upholding the rules, fails to embody the educational mission of the university, which includes guiding students towards ethical academic conduct. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a commitment to fairness, transparency, and adherence to established policies. A faculty member should first seek to understand the student's request and their understanding of academic integrity. If there is a concern about potential plagiarism, a direct conversation should be initiated, referencing the university's specific policies. This conversation should aim to educate the student about what constitutes plagiarism and the importance of original work. If after this discussion, the student persists in seeking assistance that facilitates plagiarism, or if the faculty member has clear evidence of plagiarism, then the appropriate reporting procedures outlined by Air University Islamabad should be followed. This process prioritizes both student development and the integrity of the academic environment. Question 7. Process analysis reveals that during the Air University Islamabad entrance examination, a candidate observes another applicant discreetly using a mobile phone. The candidate is aware of the strict rules against electronic devices. Considering the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair examination practices, what is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct course of action for the observing candidate? Option A. Continue with the examination without reporting the incident, assuming it is a minor issue or not their responsibility to intervene. Option B. Discreetly inform the invigilator or examination supervisor about the observed irregularity immediately after the examination concludes, providing specific details. Option C. Discuss the observation with other candidates during a break or after the examination to gauge their opinions before deciding on any action. Option D. Attempt to signal or communicate with the other candidate to stop their actions during the examination. The correct answer is B. Discreetly inform the invigilator or examination supervisor about the observed irregularity immediately after the examination concludes, providing specific details. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for an Air University Islamabad applicant regarding the ethical implications of academic integrity and the appropriate channels for addressing concerns about potential misconduct. The applicant is faced with a situation that could compromise the fairness of the entrance examination process, requiring them to make a judgment call that balances personal responsibility with adherence to institutional rules and ethical conduct. The professional challenge lies in navigating this situation without resorting to actions that could be construed as academic dishonesty themselves or that bypass established reporting mechanisms. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves discreetly and formally reporting the observed irregularity to the examination authorities through the designated channels. This upholds academic integrity by ensuring that potential issues are investigated by those responsible for the examination's fairness. It aligns with the ethical principles of honesty and responsibility expected of all individuals associated with Air University, including prospective students. This method respects the established procedures and allows for an impartial review of the situation, preventing any personal involvement in or perpetuation of potential misconduct. Incorrect approaches analysis. Reporting the observation to fellow students or attempting to discreetly share information during the exam is incorrect because it could be interpreted as collusion or an attempt to disrupt the examination process. This bypasses official channels and could lead to accusations of academic dishonesty against the individual reporting the issue. Ignoring the observation and proceeding with the exam is incorrect because it represents a failure to uphold academic integrity and a passive acceptance of potential unfairness. While it avoids direct involvement, it neglects the ethical responsibility to contribute to a fair examination environment. Confronting the individual directly during the exam is incorrect, as it could lead to a disruption of the examination for others, create an unprofessional scene, and potentially escalate the situation without proper authority or evidence. It also bypasses the established procedures for reporting and addressing examination irregularities. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any academic or organizational setting must adhere to established rules and ethical codes. When faced with potential misconduct, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the core issue, a potential breach of academic integrity. 2. Consulting relevant guidelines, understanding Air University's examination rules and ethical conduct policies. 3. Selecting the appropriate reporting mechanism, utilizing official channels designated for reporting irregularities. 4. Acting with discretion and integrity, ensuring actions do not compromise one's own ethical standing or the integrity of the process. This systematic approach ensures that concerns are addressed effectively and ethically. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a moderate risk associated with an applicant's academic credentials, specifically a significant discrepancy between their stated high school GPA and the average GPA of students admitted from their region in the past 3 years. The applicant's personal statement highlights exceptional extracurricular achievements and a compelling narrative of overcoming challenges. The admissions committee is considering the applicant for a scholarship. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for admissions at Air University Islamabad? Option A. Proceed with the scholarship recommendation based on the compelling personal narrative and extracurricular achievements, assuming the GPA discrepancy is due to a unique educational background. Option B. Request a detailed explanation and supporting documentation from the applicant regarding the GPA discrepancy and independently verify the authenticity of their academic records with their previous institution before making any admission or scholarship decisions. Option C. Admit the applicant based on their strong personal statement and extracurriculars and address the GPA discrepancy after admission by placing them on academic probation. Option D. Defer the decision on the scholarship and admission until further information is available, without actively seeking to verify the GPA discrepancy, to avoid potentially alienating the applicant. Correct answer is A. Proceed with the scholarship recommendation based on the compelling personal narrative and extracurricular achievements, assuming the GPA discrepancy is due to a unique educational background. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's academic mission with the need to maintain a secure and compliant admissions process. The admissions committee faces pressure to admit qualified candidates while adhering to Air University's established regulations and ethical standards. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate academic support and potential academic misconduct. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based review of the applicant's profile against Air University's admission criteria and academic integrity policies. This means verifying all submitted documents, cross-referencing information, and seeking clarification from the applicant or previous institutions if discrepancies arise. This approach upholds the integrity of the admissions process, ensures fairness to all applicants, and complies with Air University's regulatory framework for admissions, which implicitly mandates honesty and accuracy in applications. It aligns with the ethical principle of academic integrity, which is fundamental to any educational institution. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the applicant's stated achievements without independent verification fails to adhere to the university's due diligence requirements. This could lead to admitting unqualified or dishonest candidates, undermining the academic standards of Air University, and potentially violating its admission regulations that require accurate representation of qualifications. Another incorrect approach that involves overlooking potential red flags due to perceived pressure to meet admission quotas or institutional targets is ethically unsound. This prioritizes expediency over integrity and can lead to a compromised student body, damaging the university's reputation and violating the spirit of fair competition among applicants. It also disregards the university's responsibility to maintain rigorous academic standards. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Understanding and strictly adhering to Air University's admission policies and academic integrity guidelines. 2. Gathering and meticulously verifying all applicant information. 3. Identifying and investigating any discrepancies or anomalies. 4. Seeking objective evidence and corroboration. 5. Consulting with relevant university departments or committees if complex issues arise. 6. Making decisions based on established criteria and evidence, free from undue pressure or bias. 7. Documenting the entire decision-making process for transparency and accountability. Question 9. The performance metrics show an unusually high concentration of top-tier scores from a specific examination center, significantly deviating from the historical distribution and the performance of other centers. This deviation raises concerns about the integrity of the examination process at that particular center. Considering Air University, Islamabad's entrance examination regulations, and ethical guidelines for academic assessment, which of the following actions is the most professionally appropriate and compliant? Option A. Publicly acknowledge the anomaly and request voluntary retesting from candidates who appeared at the suspect center to maintain transparency. Option B. Adjust the scoring threshold for the suspect center to align with the average performance of other centers, thereby mitigating the perceived discrepancy. Option C. Conduct a thorough, documented investigation into the examination process at the suspect center, reviewing all relevant documentation, invigilator reports, and security protocols before any further action is considered. Option D. Immediately re-administer the examination at the suspect center to ensure fairness and validate the results. The correct answer is D. Immediately re-administer the examination at the suspect center to ensure fairness and validate the results. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving desired academic outcomes and adhering to the ethical principles of fair assessment and academic integrity, as mandated by Air University Islamabad's regulatory framework for entrance examinations. The pressure to meet performance targets can tempt individuals to overlook or compromise established procedures, potentially leading to unfair advantages or disadvantages for candidates. Careful judgment is required to balance institutional goals with the fundamental principles of equitable evaluation. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective review of the performance metrics against the established examination guidelines and policies of Air University Islamabad. This approach prioritizes transparency, fairness, and adherence to the regulatory framework. It necessitates identifying any anomalies or deviations from expected performance patterns, and then initiating a formal, documented investigation process as per university regulations. This ensures that any perceived discrepancies are addressed systematically and impartially, upholding the integrity of the entrance examination process. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on achieving the stated performance metrics without considering the underlying fairness and validity of the results would be professionally unacceptable. This could involve overlooking statistically improbable results or attributing them to external factors without proper investigation, thereby potentially validating unfair outcomes. Another incorrect approach would be to implement immediate, punitive measures based on preliminary observations without a formal investigation or due process, violating principles of natural justice and university policy. A third incorrect approach, which involves selectively highlighting data that supports a desired outcome while ignoring contradictory evidence, undermines the objectivity required in academic assessment and violates ethical standards of data integrity. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the relevant university regulations and ethical codes governing entrance examinations. This framework involves 1. Objective data review, critically examining all available performance data against established benchmarks and expected distributions. 2. Anomaly identification, pinpointing any statistically significant deviations or patterns that warrant further scrutiny. 3. Investigation initiation, following established university procedures to formally investigate identified anomalies, ensuring impartiality and thoroughness. 4. Evidence gathering, collecting all relevant evidence and documentation pertaining to the examination process and candidate performance. 5. Recommendation and action, based on the investigation findings, making recommendations for action that are consistent with university policy and uphold academic integrity. 6. Documentation, maintaining comprehensive records of all steps taken, findings, and decisions. Question 10. Quality control measures reveal that faculty member Dr. Anya Sharma, while conducting a literature review for her upcoming research paper, has identified a significant methodological flaw in a previously published article authored by her colleague, Dr. Bilal Khan. Dr. Sharma is confident in her assessment of the flaw and believes it impacts the validity of Dr. Khan's conclusions. She is considering how to address this discovery. What is the most ethically sound and professionally appropriate course of action for Dr. Sharma to take? Option A. Report the suspected flaw directly to the university's Research Integrity Office without speaking to Dr. Khan first. Option B. Disregard the discovery to avoid potential conflict and maintain a cordial working relationship with Dr. Khan. Option C. Immediately draft and submit a manuscript detailing the flaw in Dr. Khan's publication for peer review without prior consultation. Option D. Privately contact Dr. Khan, share her findings with him, and offer to discuss the matter and potential solutions. The correct answer is C. Immediately draft and submit a manuscript detailing the flaw in Dr. Khan's publication for peer review without prior consultation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a faculty member, while conducting research for a potential publication, discovers a significant flaw in a previously published work by a colleague. The challenge lies in balancing the ethical obligation to uphold academic integrity and the potential interpersonal repercussions of questioning a peer's work. The university's commitment to research ethics and the principles of scholarly communication necessitate a careful and principled response. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a direct, private, and respectful communication with the colleague whose work is in question. This aligns with the ethical guidelines of academic institutions, which generally advocate for addressing research misconduct or errors through established internal procedures and direct dialogue before escalating. This method allows the colleague an opportunity to review the findings, potentially correct the error themselves, and maintain professional collegiality. It upholds the principle of fairness and due process. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately publish the findings of the flaw without informing the original author. This bypasses the opportunity for the colleague to respond or rectify the situation, potentially damaging their reputation unfairly and violating principles of collegiality and professional courtesy. It could be seen as an act of academic aggression rather than constructive correction. Another incorrect approach is to report the suspected flaw to university administration without first attempting to discuss it with the colleague. While reporting mechanisms exist for serious academic misconduct, this situation, as described, appears to be a potential error or oversight that warrants initial direct communication. Premature reporting can create unnecessary conflict and strain relationships, and it bypasses a more collaborative problem-solving step. A third incorrect approach is to ignore the discovery altogether. This fails the ethical imperative to uphold academic integrity and contribute to the body of accurate knowledge. Allowing a flawed publication to remain unaddressed can mislead other researchers and students, undermining the credibility of the academic field and the institution. Professional reasoning. Professionals in academic settings should approach such situations with a framework that prioritizes accuracy, integrity, and collegiality. This involves 1. Verification, thoroughly re-examining the discovered flaw to ensure its validity. 2. Direct communication, engaging in a private, respectful conversation with the author of the original work, presenting the findings clearly and objectively. 3. Collaborative resolution, offering assistance or suggesting a collaborative approach to correct the error, such as a joint erratum or corrigendum. 4. Escalation if necessary. If direct communication fails to resolve the issue, or if the error is deemed a serious breach of academic integrity, then following the university's established procedures for reporting research misconduct becomes the appropriate next step. Question 11. The control framework reveals a research team at Air University Islamabad is nearing completion of a significant project with potential for high-impact publication. The lead researcher, Professor Ahmed, is concerned about the publication's authorship order. A junior researcher, Dr. Fatima, has made substantial conceptual contributions and data analysis, arguably more than Professor Ahmed in certain critical aspects. However, Professor Ahmed is the principal investigator and has secured the funding. The university's internal guidelines emphasize fair attribution based on intellectual contribution, but also acknowledge the role of principal investigators in guiding research direction. Professor Ahmed is considering listing himself as the first author, followed by Dr. Fatima, to reflect his overall project leadership, despite acknowledging Dr. Fatima's significant direct contributions. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible approach for Professor Ahmed to take regarding authorship? Option A. List himself as the first author to signify his role as principal investigator and funder, followed by Dr. Fatima, as this aligns with common academic practice for project leadership. Option B. Postpone the discussion about authorship until after the paper is accepted, hoping that the momentum of acceptance will simplify the decision-making process. Option C. Include a highly respected but minimally involved senior academic as a co-author to enhance the publication's prestige and likelihood of acceptance in a top-tier journal. Option D. Discuss the authorship order openly with Dr. Fatima, seeking her input and collaboratively agreeing on an order that accurately reflects each person's intellectual contributions, potentially including a co-first authorship if contributions are deemed equal or nearly so. The correct answer is D. Discuss the authorship order openly with Dr. Fatima, seeking her input and collaboratively agreeing on an order that accurately reflects each person's intellectual contributions, potentially including a co-first authorship if contributions are deemed equal or nearly so. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between academic integrity and the pressure to meet institutional performance metrics. The university's emphasis on publication output, while intended to foster research, can inadvertently create an environment where ethical boundaries are tested. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of academic recognition with the fundamental principles of responsible research conduct, particularly concerning the accurate representation of contributions. The correct approach involves a transparent and collaborative discussion with all involved parties to accurately reflect each individual's contribution to the research. This aligns with the ethical guidelines of academic research, which mandate fair attribution and acknowledgement of intellectual input. Specifically, it adheres to principles of academic integrity that prohibit misrepresentation of authorship or contribution, ensuring that credit is given where it is due. This approach upholds the trust placed in researchers by the academic community and the public. An incorrect approach that involves unilaterally deciding on authorship without consulting the junior researcher fails to uphold the principle of fair attribution. This can lead to demotivation, a sense of injustice, and potential disputes, undermining the collaborative spirit of research. It also risks violating ethical norms that require acknowledging the intellectual property and effort of all contributors. Another incorrect approach, which is to prioritize the publication's impact by including a more senior researcher who had minimal involvement, constitutes academic dishonesty. This misrepresents the research process and inflates the perceived significance of the work, potentially misleading peers and funding bodies. It violates the ethical obligation to present research findings truthfully and accurately. A further incorrect approach, which is to delay the decision and hope the issue resolves itself, is a failure of leadership and ethical responsibility. Procrastination in addressing such conflicts can exacerbate tensions and damage professional relationships. It also signifies an abdication of the duty to ensure ethical research practices are maintained within the team. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve open communication, a commitment to fairness, and a thorough understanding of academic ethical standards. Professionals should first seek to understand all perspectives, then consult relevant university policies on research integrity and authorship. If necessary, seeking guidance from a departmental ethics committee or a senior mentor can provide an objective framework for resolution. The ultimate goal is to ensure that the research process and its outcomes are conducted and reported with the highest degree of integrity. Question 12. Strategic planning requires a systematic approach to resource allocation. Air University's Computer Science Department has submitted a proposal for a significant investment in new research equipment, citing its critical importance for upcoming advanced research projects and attracting top-tier faculty. The department head has emphasized the urgency of the request, suggesting that delays could jeopardize their competitive edge. However, the university's central administration has not yet formally reviewed the proposal against the broader institutional strategic objectives or the established procurement regulations. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound approach for the university administration to take in this situation? Option A. Immediately approve the purchase of the equipment to support the department's research and faculty recruitment efforts, given the stated urgency. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the proposal, assessing its alignment with Air University's strategic plan, financial regulations, and procurement guidelines, and then make a decision based on the findings. Option C. Reject the proposal outright, as new equipment purchases are generally handled through a separate, long-term capital expenditure budget that has already been finalized for the current fiscal year. Option D. Defer the decision indefinitely until a more comprehensive review of all departmental resource requests can be completed, which may take several months. Correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the proposal, assessing its alignment with Air University's strategic plan, financial regulations, and procurement guidelines, and then make a decision based on the findings. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in academic institutions where resource allocation must align with strategic goals while adhering to established regulations and ethical considerations. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate needs of a specific department with the broader, long-term vision of Air University, ensuring that decisions are not only practical, but also compliant with the university's governing framework and ethical standards for resource management. Careful judgment is required to avoid favoritism, ensure fairness, and maintain transparency in the allocation process. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the proposed project against the university's strategic plan, financial regulations, and procurement guidelines. This includes assessing the project's alignment with Air University's mission, its potential return on investment, both academic and financial, and its adherence to all relevant procurement and budgetary rules. This method is professionally sound because it prioritizes institutional objectives and regulatory compliance, ensuring that resources are utilized efficiently and ethically. It demonstrates a commitment to good governance and responsible stewardship of university funds, as mandated by the university's charter and any applicable higher education commission. Heck, guidelines for public universities in Pakistan. An incorrect approach would be to immediately approve the project based solely on the department head's request and perceived urgency. This fails to uphold the university's strategic planning process and regulatory oversight. It bypasses necessary due diligence, potentially leading to misallocation of funds, non-compliance with procurement laws, and a lack of accountability. Such an approach risks setting a precedent for ad hoc decision-making, undermining the integrity of the university's financial and strategic management systems. Another incorrect approach would be to defer the decision indefinitely without a clear process for review or a timeline for resolution. This demonstrates a lack of responsiveness and can create uncertainty and frustration within departments. It also fails to meet the university's obligation to manage its resources effectively and to support its academic and research endeavors in a timely manner. A third incorrect approach would be to reject the proposal outright without a thorough evaluation. This could stifle innovation and prevent potentially valuable projects from being undertaken, even if they align with the university's long-term goals. It suggests a lack of openness to new initiatives and a failure to engage in constructive dialogue about resource needs. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing a clear, transparent, and regulated framework for evaluating all resource requests. This framework should include criteria for assessing strategic alignment, financial viability, regulatory compliance, and ethical considerations. It should also define roles and responsibilities for decision-making and establish timelines for review and approval. Professionals must prioritize adherence to institutional policies and relevant national higher education regulations, ensuring that all decisions are well documented and justifiable. Question 13. Benchmark analysis indicates that a student preparing for the Air University Islamabad entrance exam has extensively used online resources and academic journals for research. While compiling their preparatory notes, they have incorporated several paragraphs verbatim from an article without adding quotation marks or a citation, believing that since they are for personal study and not for submission, does not constitute academic misconduct. Which of the following approaches best reflects adherence to the academic integrity principles expected by Air University Islamabad in such a scenario? Option A. Remove the verbatim text entirely and rely solely on their own understanding and synthesis of the information, without any reference to the original source. Option B. Continue using the notes as they are, reasoning that since the material is for personal study and not a formal submission, the absence of citations for verbatim text is permissible. Option C. Paraphrase the content from the article extensively to avoid direct copying, assuming this will negate the need for any form of citation. Option D. Immediately revise the notes to include proper quotation marks and citations for all verbatim text taken from the external article, and acknowledge that even for personal study, maintaining academic honesty is a fundamental principle. The correct answer is D. Immediately revise the notes to include proper quotation marks and citations for all verbatim text taken from the external article, and acknowledge that even for personal study, maintaining academic honesty is a fundamental principle. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to academic integrity and the ethical responsibilities of students within the Air University Islamabad's regulatory framework. The challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of academic success with the imperative to uphold honesty and avoid plagiarism, which are fundamental principles of scholarly conduct. Misjudging the boundaries of acceptable academic practice can lead to severe consequences, including academic penalties and damage to one's reputation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves understanding and adhering to Air University Islamabad's specific academic integrity policies, which unequivocally prohibit plagiarism. This means properly citing all sources, whether they are direct quotes, paraphrased ideas, or data, to give credit to the original authors and demonstrate original thought. This approach aligns with the university's commitment to fostering a culture of honesty and intellectual rigor, as mandated by its academic regulations. Incorrect approach is analysis. Submitting work that incorporates ideas or text from external sources without proper attribution constitutes plagiarism. This directly violates the academic integrity policies of Air University Islamabad, which are designed to ensure that all submitted work is the student's own original creation. This failure to cite sources is a serious ethical breach and can result in disciplinary action. Presenting someone else's work as one's own, even if minor sections are altered, is also a form of plagiarism. The university's policies typically define plagiarism broadly to encompass any unauthorized use of another's intellectual property. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding or disregard for the ethical principles of academic honesty. Relying heavily on external sources without significant original contribution or analysis, even with citations, can also be problematic if it falls short of demonstrating the student's own learning and critical thinking. While not always outright plagiarism, it can be seen as a failure to meet the academic expectations of original work and may be flagged by academic integrity checks. Professional reasoning. Professionals in academic settings, like students at Air University, Islamabad, should adopt a proactive approach to academic integrity. This involves thoroughly familiarizing themselves with the university's specific policies on plagiarism and academic misconduct. When in doubt about proper citation or the originality of their work, students should seek clarification from their instructors or academic advisors. A commitment to transparency and honesty in all academic endeavors is paramount. Question 14. Governance review demonstrates that a significant donation from a prominent alumnus is being considered, but credible allegations of plagiarism have surfaced against this alumnus during their time as a student at Air University. The university is facing budget constraints, and this donation could alleviate immediate financial pressures. The review committee needs to decide how to proceed with the donation offer in light of these allegations. Option A. Proceed with accepting the donation after a thorough, confidential investigation into the plagiarism allegations, ensuring due process and making a decision based on the findings, irrespective of the donation's financial impact. Option B. Initiate a public inquiry into the plagiarism allegations, which may delay or jeopardize the donation, but ensures full transparency. Option C. Immediately accept the donation to address the university's financial needs, deferring any investigation into the past allegations until after the funds are secured. Option D. Reject the donation outright due to the allegations, without conducting any investigation, to avoid any potential association with academic misconduct. The correct answer is A. Proceed with accepting the donation after a thorough, confidential investigation into the plagiarism allegations, ensuring due process and making a decision based on the findings, irrespective of the donation's financial impact. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate financial needs and the long-term implications of academic integrity and reputational risk. The decision-maker must navigate the pressure to secure funding while upholding the ethical standards expected of an educational institution. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests, ensuring that any decision aligns with the university's core mission and regulatory obligations. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the alleged misconduct, adhering strictly to Air University's established policies and procedures for academic integrity. This includes ensuring due process for all involved parties, maintaining confidentiality where appropriate, and making decisions based on objective evidence. This approach is ethically sound and professionally justifiable as it upholds the principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability, which are fundamental to maintaining academic credibility and public trust. It directly aligns with the implicit regulatory framework governing educational institutions in Pakistan, which emphasizes the importance of academic honesty and robust internal governance. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the allegations without a proper inquiry, driven by the desire to avoid negative publicity or potential disruption to the funding negotiations. This failure to investigate violates the university's own policies and ethical obligations to its students and faculty, potentially leading to a loss of credibility and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach would be to prematurely accept the funding offer without addressing the integrity concerns, thereby implicitly condoning or overlooking the alleged misconduct. This prioritizes financial gain over ethical principles, undermining the university's reputation and potentially setting a dangerous precedent. A third incorrect approach would be to selectively investigate only those aspects that support the desired outcome, rather than conducting a comprehensive and impartial review. This lack of objectivity and fairness constitutes a significant ethical and professional failing. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and adherence to established policies and regulations. This involves 1. Identifying the core ethical dilemma and potential conflicts of interest. 2. Consulting relevant university policies, codes of conduct, and any applicable national regulations governing educational institutions. 3. Gathering all relevant facts impartially and objectively. 4. Considering the potential short-term and long-term consequences of each possible course of action on all stakeholders, including students, faculty, staff, and the university's reputation. 5. Seeking advice from legal counsel or ethics committees if the situation is complex or involves significant risk. 6. Making a decision that is consistent with ethical principles and regulatory requirements, even if it presents short-term challenges. Question 15. Benchmark analysis indicates that a senior faculty member at Air University, Islamabad, who is also a member of the admissions committee, discovers that their nephew is an applicant for the upcoming intake. The faculty member has significant influence within the committee and is aware of the nephew's academic record, which is competitive but not exceptionally outstanding. The faculty member is considering how to best navigate this situation to ensure fairness, while also supporting their family member's aspirations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of academic integrity and ethical conduct expected within the regulatory framework of Air University Islamabad's entrance exam process? Option A. The senior faculty member should abstain from attending the specific meeting where their nephew's application is discussed, but remain involved in other committee deliberations. Option B. The senior faculty member should recuse themselves from all discussions and voting related to their nephew's application, informing the committee chair of the familial relationship. Option C. The senior faculty member should actively advocate for their nephew's admission, highlighting their knowledge of the nephew's character and potential, while disclosing the relationship to the committee. Option D. The senior faculty member should discreetly share their nephew's application details with other committee members, encouraging them to give it favorable consideration due to the family connection. Correct answer is B. The senior faculty member should recuse themselves from all discussions and voting related to their nephew's application, informing the committee chair of the familial relationship. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain academic integrity and the potential for undue influence on the admissions process. The admissions committee at Air University Islamabad is tasked with evaluating candidates based on merit and adherence to established criteria. The involvement of a senior faculty member, who is also a relative of an applicant, introduces a conflict of interest that, if not managed properly, can compromise the fairness and transparency of the selection process. Careful judgment is required to uphold the university's reputation and ensure that all applicants are assessed impartially. The correct approach involves the senior faculty member recusing themselves from any discussion or decision-making concerning their relative's application. This upholds the principle of impartiality and avoids any perception of favoritism. Air University's admission regulations, while not explicitly detailed here, would implicitly or explicitly require adherence to ethical standards of fairness and the avoidance of conflicts of interest in admissions. This approach aligns with general principles of good governance and academic ethics, ensuring that the admissions process is seen as objective and merit-based. An incorrect approach would be for the senior faculty member to participate in the evaluation and decision-making process for their relative's application, even if they believe they can remain impartial. This creates an inherent conflict of interest and violates the ethical duty to avoid situations that could compromise objectivity. Such an action could lead to accusations of bias, undermine the credibility of the admissions committee, and potentially result in a challenge to the validity of the admission decision. Another incorrect approach would be to disclose the familial relationship to the committee, but still participate in the deliberations. As this does not resolve the conflict of interest, it merely acknowledges it while continuing to engage in the potentially biased process. A further incorrect approach would be to delegate the decision-making solely to a junior member of the committee without proper oversight or a clear rationale, as this could be seen as an attempt to circumvent the conflict rather than address it ethically. Professionals in such situations should follow a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, fairness, and adherence to institutional policies and ethical guidelines. This typically involves identifying potential conflicts of interest, disclosing them promptly to the relevant authority, e.g., the head of admissions or dean, and taking appropriate action to mitigate the conflict, such as recusal. If institutional policies are unclear, seeking guidance from the university's ethics committee or legal counsel is advisable. Question 16. The audit findings indicate potential discrepancies in the procurement process for departmental research equipment, suggesting a risk of non-compliance with university financial regulations and potential misuse of funds. Option A. Immediately suspend the responsible department head and initiate disciplinary proceedings based on the preliminary audit findings. Option B. Initiate a detailed review of the procurement records, interview relevant departmental staff and procurement officers, and consult with the internal audit department to assess the validity and extent of the identified risks before proposing any corrective actions. Option C. File the audit report without further action, assuming that the identified risks are within acceptable operational tolerances for a research-intensive department. Option D. Advise the audit team to disregard these findings, as they are likely minor procedural oversights given the department's research output. The correct answer is B. Initiate a detailed review of the procurement records, interview relevant departmental staff and procurement officers, and consult with the internal audit department to assess the validity and extent of the identified risks before proposing any corrective actions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the audit findings, while identifying potential risks, are not definitive proof of misconduct. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough investigation and accountability with the principles of fairness and due process. A hasty or accusatory response could damage reputations and create a hostile work environment, while inaction could allow serious issues to fester. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate next steps based on the nature and severity of the findings. The correct approach involves a systematic and objective risk assessment process, adhering to Air University's internal policies and any relevant national regulations governing academic institutions and financial probity. This approach prioritizes gathering further information to validate the audit findings and understand the root causes of the identified risks. It involves engaging relevant stakeholders, such as the department head and internal audit, to collaboratively develop a mitigation plan. This aligns with the ethical obligation to act with integrity and due diligence, ensuring that decisions are evidence-based and proportionate. The regulatory framework for academic institutions in Pakistan, while not explicitly detailed here, would generally emphasize transparency, accountability, and adherence to established financial and administrative procedures. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement punitive measures without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge the preliminary nature of audit findings and could lead to unfair disciplinary actions, violating principles of natural justice. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the findings outright due to the perceived low risk or the seniority of the individuals involved. This demonstrates a lack of professional skepticism and a failure to uphold the institution's commitment to good governance and risk management, potentially exposing the university to reputational damage and financial loss. Ignoring the findings altogether represents a dereliction of duty, as it allows identified risks to persist unchecked, contravening the fundamental responsibility to safeguard institutional assets and maintain operational integrity. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the scope and limitations of the audit. They should then initiate a structured risk assessment, which involves identifying the specific risks, analyzing their likelihood and impact, and evaluating existing controls. Based on this assessment, a proportionate response should be formulated, which may include further investigation, policy review, staff training, or disciplinary action, always in consultation with legal and HR departments, and in accordance with university statutes and relevant national laws. Question 17. The audit findings indicate potential weaknesses in the procurement process for research equipment, with some documentation appearing incomplete. What is the most appropriate next step for the audit team to take? Option A. Advise the procurement department to halt all further equipment purchases until a full investigation can be completed. Option B. File the findings as minor procedural issues that do not warrant further immediate action, assuming the department will self-correct. Option C. Immediately report the incomplete documentation to the Vice Chancellor, highlighting the potential for financial irregularities and reputational damage. Option D. Conduct further detailed testing and analysis to confirm the nature and extent of the control weaknesses, and discuss preliminary observations with the relevant department heads to gather context before formulating any conclusions or recommendations. The correct answer is D. Conduct further detailed testing and analysis to confirm the nature and extent of the control weaknesses, and discuss preliminary observations with the relevant department heads to gather context before formulating any conclusions or recommendations. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for timely and accurate information with the potential for misinterpretation or misuse of preliminary findings. The audit team has identified potential control weaknesses, but these are not yet confirmed or fully understood. Rushing to communicate these findings without proper validation could lead to unnecessary alarm, damage to the institution's reputation, and premature implementation of corrective actions that might not be effective or even necessary. The correct approach involves a systematic and thorough process of risk assessment and validation before any communication. This entails not only identifying potential risks, but also evaluating their likelihood and impact, and then verifying the findings through further investigation and discussion with relevant stakeholders. This methodical approach ensures that any reported issues are accurate, well understood, and actionable, aligning with the principles of good governance and responsible disclosure expected within an academic institution like Air University. It also adheres to the implicit ethical obligation to report findings truthfully and without exaggeration. Communicating preliminary findings without further validation is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses critical steps in the audit process. This premature disclosure risks misrepresenting the situation, potentially leading to incorrect assumptions and decisions by university management. It fails to uphold the principle of accuracy and objectivity in reporting, which are fundamental to the credibility of any audit function. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the findings altogether, assuming they are minor or will resolve themselves. This is a dereliction of duty for an audit team. It fails to identify and report potential risks, which could lead to significant financial, operational, or reputational damage to Air University in the future. This approach directly contradicts the purpose of an audit, which is to provide assurance and identify areas for improvement. A third incorrect approach is to immediately escalate the findings to the highest levels of university leadership, without first attempting to understand the root cause or discuss them with the department directly responsible. This can create undue panic and bypass established communication channels, potentially undermining departmental autonomy and creating an adversarial relationship. It also fails to leverage the expertise within the audited department to gain a fuller understanding of the context and potential solutions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This begins with identifying potential issues, followed by a thorough analysis of their likelihood and potential impact. Crucially, it includes a validation phase where findings are discussed with relevant parties to confirm accuracy and understand context. Only after this comprehensive assessment should communication occur, tailored to the appropriate audience and with clear recommendations for mitigation. This ensures that decisions are based on verified information and promote constructive problem solving. Question 18. The audit findings indicate potential weaknesses in the procurement process of the university's IT department. These findings are based on initial review of documentation and interviews, and further investigation is required to confirm their scope and impact. Which of the following is the most appropriate next step for the audit team? Option A. Document the preliminary findings in a memo and file it away, as further investigation is needed and the findings are not yet conclusive. Option B. Conduct further detailed testing and analysis to validate the preliminary findings. Discuss these with the IT department management to understand their perspective and gather additional information, and then prepare a draft report for review. Option C. Immediately report the preliminary findings of potential weaknesses to the Vice Chancellor, highlighting the risks to the university's financial resources. Option D. Share the preliminary findings with the heads of other university departments to alert them to potential similar issues within their areas. The correct answer is B. Conduct further detailed testing and analysis to validate the preliminary findings. Discuss these with the IT department management to understand their perspective and gather additional information, and then prepare a draft report for review. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for timely and accurate information with the potential for misinterpretation or misuse of preliminary findings. The audit team has identified potential control weaknesses, but these are not yet confirmed or fully understood. Rushing to communicate these findings without proper validation could lead to unnecessary alarm, damage to the department's reputation, and potentially incorrect decisions based on incomplete data. The correct approach involves a systematic and thorough process of validating the audit findings. This means conducting further investigation, gathering additional evidence, and discussing the preliminary observations with the relevant department management to ensure a complete and accurate understanding of the issues. This approach aligns with professional auditing standards which emphasize objectivity, due professional care, and the importance of communicating findings that are well supported by evidence. Specifically, it adheres to the principles of ensuring that audit conclusions are based on sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and that communication of findings is clear, concise, and constructive, allowing for management response and remediation. An incorrect approach of immediately escalating the preliminary findings to senior management without further validation is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the established audit process, fails to provide management with an opportunity to explain or correct potential misunderstandings, and can lead to premature and potentially damaging conclusions. It violates the principle of due professional care by not ensuring the accuracy and completeness of the information being communicated. Another incorrect approach of dismissing the findings due to their preliminary nature without any further investigation or documentation is also professionally unsound. While the findings are preliminary, they represent potential risks that warrant attention. Ignoring them without due diligence could lead to unaddressed control weaknesses and potential future issues, failing to fulfill the audit department's responsibility to identify and report on significant risks. A third incorrect approach of sharing the preliminary findings with other departments not directly involved in the audit or remediation process before they are finalized and validated is a breach of confidentiality and professional ethics. Audit findings are sensitive information and should only be shared with authorized personnel on a need-to-know basis, and only after they have been properly vetted and communicated through the appropriate channels. This premature disclosure can lead to speculation, anxiety, and potential reputational damage. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the audit plan and objectives, a commitment to following established audit methodologies, and open communication with the audited department. Professionals should prioritize gathering sufficient appropriate evidence, critically evaluating preliminary observations, and engaging in constructive dialogue with management before forming final conclusions and communicating them through the appropriate reporting lines. Question 19. Upon reviewing an applicant's file for the Air University Islamabad entrance exam, you notice a discrepancy that could potentially impact their eligibility. You know a colleague in a different department who has access to a broader database that might contain clarifying information. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with university regulations and ethical standards? Option A. Inform the applicant directly about the discrepancy and ask them to provide additional documentation, bypassing official channels to expedite the resolution. Option B. Access the applicant's file through authorized channels only and consult with the admissions committee or supervisor to determine the correct procedure for addressing the discrepancy. Option C. Contact your colleague in the other department and ask them to discreetly search their database for the applicant's information to clarify the discrepancy. Option D. Access the applicant's file using your existing credentials and attempt to cross-reference the information with publicly available data to resolve the discrepancy. The correct answer is B. Access the applicant's file through authorized channels only and consult with the admissions committee or supervisor to determine the correct procedure for addressing the discrepancy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. The entrance exam context implies a need for fairness and integrity in the admissions process, making the unauthorized access and use of information particularly problematic. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any actions taken are compliant with Air University's policies and relevant data protection principles, without compromising the integrity of the examination process. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to established protocols for handling sensitive applicant information. This means recognizing that the applicant's academic records and personal details are confidential and should only be accessed through authorized channels and for legitimate purposes, such as the official admissions review. Any deviation from these protocols, even with the intention of assisting the applicant or expediting a process, constitutes a breach of trust and potentially violates data privacy regulations and university policies. This approach upholds the principles of confidentiality, integrity, and fairness central to academic admissions. An incorrect approach would be to access the applicant's files without proper authorization, even if it's to quickly verify information or to offer preliminary advice. This action directly violates the principle of data privacy and confidentiality. It bypasses the established security measures designed to protect applicant information and could lead to unauthorized disclosure or misuse of sensitive data. Such a breach undermines the trust placed in the admissions staff and could have serious repercussions for both the individual and the university, including disciplinary action and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to share the applicant's information with unauthorized personnel, even if they are colleagues within the university. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and violates the principle of need-to-know access. Information about applicants should only be shared with individuals directly involved in the admissions decision-making process and only to the extent necessary for their role. Disseminating this information more broadly, even informally, exposes the university to risks of data leakage and can create an environment where sensitive data is not adequately protected. The professional reasoning process in such a situation should begin with a clear understanding of the university's policies on data handling and admissions procedures. When faced with a request or situation that seems to require accessing sensitive information, the professional should first consider the authorized pathways for obtaining and using such data. If there is any doubt about the legitimacy or authorization of an action, the professional should err on the side of caution and consult with their supervisor or the relevant department, e.g., IT security, legal counsel, or admissions oversight, to ensure compliance. The priority must always be to protect the integrity of the admissions process and the privacy of the applicants. Question 20. The audit findings indicate potential procedural weaknesses in the administration of the recent Air University Islamabad entrance exam, specifically concerning the verification of candidate eligibility documents. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the audit team? Option A. Immediately inform the admissions officers responsible for document verification about the identified weaknesses to allow them to rectify the process for future applicants. Option B. Share the preliminary audit observations with the university's public relations department to prepare a statement addressing potential concerns from the public. Option C. Formally present the detailed audit findings and recommendations to the Vice Chancellor's office and the relevant admissions committee for review and decision-making. Option D. Advise the admissions department to proceed with the current admission cycle while noting the findings for future improvement, given the proximity of admission deadlines. The correct answer is C. Formally present the detailed audit findings and recommendations to the Vice Chancellor's office and the relevant admissions committee for review and decision-making. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for timely information with the imperative to maintain the integrity and confidentiality of sensitive audit findings. The university entrance exam context implies a need for robust and fair processes, and premature disclosure of audit results could compromise this. The correct approach involves a structured and authorized communication process. This means that the audit findings, which are preliminary and potentially sensitive, should be formally presented to the relevant university authorities, such as the admissions committee or the Vice Chancellor's office, for review and decision-making. This ensures that the information is handled through established governance channels, allowing for proper interpretation, validation, and the formulation of appropriate actions based on established university policies and the regulatory framework governing university admissions in Pakistan. This aligns with principles of good governance and accountability, ensuring that decisions are made by those with the authority and responsibility to do so, and that any subsequent actions are consistent with the university's operational guidelines and any applicable higher education regulations in Pakistan. An incorrect approach would be to immediately share the audit findings with the admissions officers directly involved in processing applications. This bypasses the formal reporting structure and could lead to premature or biased decisions, potentially compromising the fairness of the entrance exam process. It also risks the unauthorized dissemination of sensitive information before it has been properly vetted and approved by higher authorities. Another incorrect approach would be to disregard the audit findings due to the pressure of the upcoming admission deadlines. Ignoring critical audit feedback, especially concerning potential irregularities or systemic weaknesses, is a failure of due diligence and professional responsibility. It undermines the purpose of the audit, which is to identify and address issues, and could lead to significant reputational damage or operational failures for the university if not acted upon. A further incorrect approach would be to discuss the audit findings informally with external stakeholders, such as prospective students or their parents. This constitutes a serious breach of confidentiality and professional ethics. Such discussions could lead to misinformation, unfair advantages, or legal repercussions, and severely damage the trust placed in the university's admissions process. The professional decision-making process in such a situation should involve 1. Recognizing the sensitivity and preliminary nature of the audit findings. 2. Adhering strictly to the university's established communication protocols for audit reports. 3. Prioritizing formal reporting to the designated authorities responsible for reviewing and acting upon such findings. 4. Ensuring that any actions taken are based on approved decisions and university policies. 5. Maintaining strict confidentiality throughout the process.